Chapter 5. Founding. After his meeting with Kuriko, Takuma immediately contacted and met with Sansui Namiwara Suere, the third crown prince of the Suere kingdom. However, yes, I understand exactly what you want to say. But please believe me, I don't really mean it either, and I'm really troubled. Takuma was greeted by Sansui and the others with silent, astonished looks on their faces. And to Kamako, who was smiling smugly with a hint of murderous intent, Takuma, with his serious face, carefully and patiently explained the events that had occurred up to that point. Also, Kamako, this was all just my sister's prank and the old nanny's malice. You understand, right? I see, I understand the details. If that's the reason, there seems to be no need to report this to the ethics committee. Reisepshi naturally had its own vigilante organization. Commoners were dealt with by them, but when it came to those in positions of power, it became more complicated. To begin with, Reisepshi was home to members of the Galactic Federation and even pirates. If any scandals were to come to light, it would tarnish the reputation of Renza, and such incidents had indeed led to leaks of state secrets in the past. The Ethics Committee served as a self-regulatory oversight body for Renza nobility, tasked with preventing such occurrences. Interestingly, the organization was run by noblewomen, including the 5 Renzan queens. They were a formidable group. Yeah, I see. I'm glad you understand. Takuma truly felt relieved by Kamako's words and drank the tea he was given in one gulp. At any rate, he no longer had to worry about being summoned to appear before the Ethics Committee. Seriously? I can't believe how much stress I've had today. First it was Magioku, then Kuriko, and now Kamako. Takuma, I'd like to hear the details of the meeting right away, but I'll lend you some clothes, so could you please get changed first? That would be better for you too, wouldn't it? That would be a relief. I wish I could go out and buy some clothes to change into, but my personal assets are frozen, and I don't want anyone I know to see me in this outfit. It's a little late now, but is it okay for us? You guys won't spread the word around, will you? Besides, a scandal involving a party member can be fatal. Party member? Takuma, what's that? Sansui and the others instantly beamed with joy at Takuma's words. I can't relax anymore. I see. So that's why you rushed over here without even changing your clothes. Now I understand why you want to make Santen your enemy. Right, huh? Hearing Sansui's intriguing words, Takuma's eyes widened. I thought that if Saurendano was there, you could at least borrow some clothes. Takuma, who had completely forgotten that he could borrow a uniform from Sauren, collapsed weakly onto the table. All the hard work I put in to get here while dodging persistent flirting was for nothing. I thought I was staying calm, but it seems I wasn't. Well, with that appearance, I can understand why they would want to hit on you. Ahem. I can understand why you were so excited that you couldn't stay calm. But that princess sure is fearless. Or maybe she just doesn't know how scary Sanen is. With Cow around, that's not likely. Besides, as the princess of a country, she should know the meaning of power, right? That's true. Even so, it's an undeniable fact that the godly knights, made without the brain tree and using only their technology, have demonstrated the ability to fight against the armored cavalry, the highest-ranking cavalry made by Santen. I've heard that the princess is already gaining more and more sympathizers, especially among lower-ranking knights, so they should become a force that can't be ignored. If they use the dueling system well with that power, they won't be easily defeated. In battle, the more powerful the opponent, the more advantageous it was. However, the duel system could turn that disadvantage around. Let's start by sorting out the information. Now that we've formed a party, all we have to do is run errands for our elder brothers. We're no longer bound by the shackles that say it's up to the higher-ups to think ahead and that it would be considered excessive for us to interfere. Of course, we can continue to follow suit as we have done up until now. Takuma's spirits were lifted by Sansui and the others' light-hearted banter, and he took a deep breath. I'm sorry to involve you guys, but I can't deny that it's my fault. But I think the time has come. We also feel that we are at a crossroads. Then we need to discuss what to do next, right? Sansui looked around and saw that everyone agreed. Thank you. Now, as you can see from looking at some of the documents, the economic scale of Renza and that country is completely different. Takuma displayed some data from the website that Kuriko told him about. There's been a lot of development, especially since the pirate obstacles were removed. Well, that's to be expected. According to this document, the scale of the pirates over there and the amount of damage they caused were ridiculous. If you add them all up, doesn't that exceed the total production of Renza? That's right. If we could completely eliminate that problem, how much of the manpower and funds we spend on dealing with it could we redirect to development? This Galaxy Academy has a long history and is of an incredible scale. With a joint police force covering the entire Federation, there's no doubt that the stabilization of public order will put them at an even greater advantage over other powers. The more they looked at it, the more the difference in scale between the two became apparent. Of course, they couldn't just accept it at face value. Just to confirm, how reliable is this information from the Galactic Academy? Sansui turned to look at Kamako, who would likely have that kind of information. In fact, her information network was wider than anyone else here. It almost entirely matches the information we have gathered so far, and more than anything, it's proof that it was Masue Jaikirin who introduced Takuma to the princess over there. I have certainly seen it with my own eyes. So, is it reasonable to assume that this information is true? At worst, we could be swallowed up by the Galactic Federation. That's pretty scary. Isn't it too early to think about that? You should feel a sense of crisis. In the first place, the reason Hakuren Salma and the others brought Yamada Sena was to eliminate the pirates and achieve the same stability as over there, right? However, while they thought they had successfully eliminated only the pirates, they ended up dragging out the dark side of Renza. To be honest, I think the situation is becoming more and more troublesome even before the Galactic Federation comes along. It's true that there are 6 godly knights and 5 holy machines. And the maintainers, who have been rumored for a long time, have infiltrated the center of power more than we thought. It feels like the conspiracy theory has become a bit of a reality. Washu's prank had exposed the hidden pests more than expected. This kind of prank was commonplace at Galaxy Academy, but it was unbearable when it was done in a normal place. What may be playful for Washu was deadly poison in the normal world. It's certain that the pirate armored cavalry is also involved. Isn't this a very dangerous situation? If things go wrong, isn't it possible that the pirates and the maintainers could take control before the Galactic Federation does? It might have been dangerous if they had continued to operate in the shadows without coming out into the open. However, their godly knight is in a draw with Yamada Sena. He has defeated one of the 5 holy knights, and then there's the princess godly knight. They make a good counterweight. But what's more important is why the maintainers suddenly showed up. If we think about it logically, it must be because they viewed the godly knight as a threat? It certainly feels strange. That's the maintainer's greatest strength. But if she has something even more hidden than that, then I'm totally helpless. I also think that's the maintainer's greatest strength. The fact that they came to destroy the godly knights with that strength means that they must have decided that it was the maintainer's greatest obstacle. Takuma looked at Sansui and the others meaningfully. I understand what Takuma is trying to say. So, it's Yamada Sena and the others' actions themselves that are being viewed as dangerous, right? What do you mean? So Yamada Sena was brought here to help get rid of pirates, right? But the results were not good. Apparently, there were many people among them who weren't pirates. That's why the extermination force was disbanded. Maybe it was actually going well? Most of the people Sena encountered were members of the privileged class. There were almost no pirates. That's why his abilities were questioned. The unit was downsized, and Karen and the others were sent back to their parents. If you think about it that way, it all makes sense. It's just a possibility, though. What if those who were deemed not to be pirates were in fact maintainers? That's enough reason to consider Yamada Sena dangerous. So, why don't we investigate those people? Among the suspects are nobles and people in important positions. It's currently impossible for us to investigate them. On the other hand, from Sansui's perspective, there was a high possibility that they would be crushed. I agree with Takuma. Perhaps the higher-ups are aware of this. Since I noticed it, I'm sure they're investigating in secret. However, the maintainers' forces are not normal, and they've penetrated the core, so I don't think they can do anything large-scale. Well, we should probably keep this conversation between us. After all, it seems that even my brothers have been having trouble identifying maintainers ever since that incident. Even if there were suspicious people, it was unclear to what extent they were involved. In reality, it was highly likely they were only being used without their knowledge, and if they were all eliminated, the government would be paralyzed. Furthermore, the interests of the nobles were intricately intertwined, and there was a possibility that simply conducting an interview investigation could make the problem worse. In any case, it seemed that they didn't know where the landmines were hiding. It seems that the stability of Renza under the rule of the 5 royal families is a disaster. In the worst-case scenario, we may have to consider the possibility of Renza splitting up. Although they were originally called the 5 royal families, over their long history, the power structures, interests, and blood ties had become intricately intertwined, forming a relationship similar to that of a single nation, and they were now in a state where they were infiltrated by maintainers in a complex way. It was like cancer cells metastasizing throughout the body. It was nearly impossible to separate them all, and even if it were possible, they would not be able to maintain their vital functions. If our deduction is correct, then Yamada-Sena is the key after all. Just as he was effective in fighting pirates over there, he could be used to identify maintainers here. There's a problem. The reason why the princess is willing to make Santen her enemy is not just because of the brain tree. It is also to ensure the safety of Yamada-Sena, the master of the godly knight. So that's what Takuma's thinking is leading to. Well, yes. The reason we wanted to capture Yamada-Sena in the first place was to find the legendary godly knight, but on top of that there was already a lot of fighting between various forces, and now we have to deal with the princess over there, and the maintainers as well. We certainly can't act carelessly. Even the slightest mistake could cause the fire to spread everywhere. Based on Yamada-Sena's records over there, it seems like this won't be just a flare-up. If that's the case, I'm curious about the Galactic Federation's actions. It all started when Hakorin Salma and her people used force to bring Yamada-Sena over. They might intervene here under the pretext of protecting Yamada-Sena. It's not a problem right now, but if things fall into chaos here, the problem was that Sena and the others were top-tier VIPs over there. They couldn't deny the possibility that they might force their way here under the pretext of protecting VIPs. In the end, forming a cooperative relationship with the princess is the most realistic plan. The problem is our rank. That means we can't even act as messengers. The moment we join forces with the princess, we'll be subject to punishment. If we're not careful, it could end up working to the maintainer's advantage. So, what should we do about it? It feels like we're forcing this into the spotlight. However, as the princess over there also said, whenever Yamada-Sena is involved, things always move forward suddenly. Maybe it's the godly knight of the maintainers. Well, if you think that they have shown some promise, it's an honor and a chance, but our powers are still weak. Isn't it too early for us to fight on the public stage? That's purely for our convenience. The times are changing at an incredible speed, so if we try to protect ourselves now, the outcome may end up being decided while we remain just errand-running boys for our brothers. Even so, I think you can still live a relatively peaceful life. Jiki smiled sarcastically. Hee. Is that what you want, Jiki? Not at all. If I try everything and it doesn't work, that's fine too. I'm a realist. So, shall we continue the discussion like this? Everyone answered Takuma's question with a smile in the affirmative. Sansui and the others had felt a sense of stagnation in their own positions up until now, so they had no objections to Takuma's proposal. However, they were just confirming each other's thoughts on the matter and working to reach a consensus. Okay, everyone, no objections then. I know this is going to dampen your enthusiasm, but the real question is what can we do? Listening to Takuma and the princess's conversation, I don't think she has very high expectations of us. I understand that. For now, Kao is our biggest supporter. Our next challenge will be how to increase our presence. But what will Kao do next? It wouldn't be surprising if he decided to take advantage of this opportunity to become the chief of Renza while continuing to lead the princess's support. For now, Sauron Salma's former royal family is on the princess's side, but the democratic faction is keeping a watchful eye. They are also under the influence of the maintainers. Kamako added some additional information while brewing a new cup of tea. Since Hakoran Salma and the others are unable to provide direct backup, this is a good chance to make inroads. It's also more dangerous, but it's worth it. By the way, what would happen if a force other than the princess got hold of Yamada Sena first? In fact, that's a very good possibility. It depends on the state of the Godly Knight. I have no idea about that, but I think the only way to get him to join in is to appease its master, Yamada Sena. If it's as the princess said, then it's true, right? Well, yes. But if what you've said is true, then that power will be directed at you. Since the Godly Knight was trying to protect its master, if they took drastic measures towards Sena, then the same destructive force that occurred during the duel would occur there. That's a truly chilling story. Even before I asked the princess, it was suggested that the higher brain trees may have their own will. It's definitely best not to provoke them. So that means the situation changes depending on who you come into contact with first, right? It was like Russian roulette with bullets that had the power of a nuclear explosion. We certainly can't take too long. Assuming we successfully protect Yamada Sena, our ideal situation would be to carry out my sister's plan, eliminate the influence of pirates, or rather the maintainers, and develop Renza under the current system, right? If that happens, we'll be able to present ourselves as an equal when facing the Galaxy Federation. And from the way you speak, it seems like that's what they want too. Well, it would be the cheapest and safest thing for them. War was costly, and if a country was destroyed, it took time and money to rebuild. If the country suffered a lot of resentment, maintaining law and order required a huge amount of manpower and budget. Dominating another country was not an easy task. Now, the question is how we can increase our presence in the flow or become part of the core of the flow. I guess it comes back to the armored cavalry, doesn't it? That's right. At the moment, the armored cavalry are the main fighting force in Renza. For the princess to be able to function to her full potential, she will need a core of armored cavalry to act as her hands and feet. There's no doubt about that, since she called out to Takuma. She's got quite a few brain trees that she obtained in the duel, after all. Does Takuma still have some kind of foothold in Mahakuten? Unfortunately, it's completely cut off from the center and its surrounding areas. That's been thoroughly covered. But since they completely refused to return the brain tree, it's probably impossible to get Santon's cooperation anyway. It's probably going to be difficult for Kao to do anything related to the armored cavalry without the cooperation of Santon. It would have been better if each country still had their own manufacturers. By merging into three, they had become independent of each country. Even though we have a monopoly on the technology of the armored cavalry, Santen cannot manufacture armored cavalry on their own. They can only do so if they have subcontractors with superior skills. Oh, so the princess gave you the information about the Galaxy Academy. This meant that the Galaxy Academy could provide the technology to manufacture armored cavalry and large humanoid weapons. I know I may say this, but there are many subcontractors who are treated poorly under a monopoly. So, depending on the conditions, there is a possibility that we can attract them. But armored cavalry technology is quite specialized. Is it even possible to transfer that technology? If we are to believe the princess's story, then both the godly knight Yamatsu Ukumi and the ship called Kamadake that cut through the maintainer's armored cavalry were made by a scientist over there called a philosopher. What's surprising is that they didn't use the brain tree. Well, I had heard rumors like that, but is that why he has that much power? If that is true, then there is no problem with the technology of the godly knight. But is it possible that Santen secretly cooperated in the creation of the godly knight Yamatsu Ukumi? For better or worse, Santen is in a state of mutual surveillance. I think it would be impossible to keep the creation of such a large armored cavalry completely secret. The Yamatsu Ukumi itself is quite unusual. It feels more like a living thing than a machine, and to achieve that kind of power without the brain tree, I think detailed verification is necessary, but from what I saw of the documents from over there, it's clear that the scientific level is different from ours. It's frustrating, though. Now that I think about it, I heard that when Recepshi moved over there, a bunch of people came and bought all their products. It was well known that merchants and manufacturers flocked to Recepshi to purchase advanced home appliances sourced from the Galactic Federation. There's no doubt that the princess has connections with scientists who have the technology to at least create a godly knight class. If we can use their advanced technology to manufacture and maintain the godly knights, I think we could surpass Santon. If the armored cavalry achieves success, more subcontractors will be drawn to us. So the problem is the budget. While Sansui and the others were having a good conversation, Kamako dropped a bombshell. Money is the foundation of everything. That's true. Without Santon's cooperation, the initial investment for the armored cavalry production line will have to come out of our own pockets, and even if we borrow money, it's unlikely that we'll be able to get a loan based on our credit rating alone. The major banks are already fully committed. The truth is, we also want to expand our activities. We're trying to raise funds by using government funding and our personal assets as collateral, but we're having a hard time. It's difficult to say, but Sansui gave a wry smile and looked at Takuma. So, you were counting on me. If only you had come to me before I got kicked out, but that's just complaining. However, thanks to you expressing your intention to join, the minimum standard for founding the party has been met, so the response should be a little better. Well, there's no point in thinking about it here. We have an immediate goal, so let's just get moving. With that said, Sansui and the others stood up.